I want you to picture this. It's a bright, sunny morning in 1966. There's an 18-year-old girl driving home on a quiet two-lane road in West Virginia. The radio, it was playing low, and the sun was warm on her face. Everything, it felt completely normal. That's until something steps out on the side of the road. It was 7 feet tall, it had gray skin, and huge wings folded tight against its body like it was a cloak. But those eyes, glowing blood red, they locked straight onto hers right through that windshield. She couldn't look away. It was like this thing was reaching inside her head and freezing her right there behind the wheel. Her foot, it was still on the gas, but her mind just stopped. Then this thing spreads its large wings, launches straight up into the air, and flies right over the top of her car. And it started chasing her down the highway like it didn't want her to get away. She finally made it home, and her heart was slamming in her chest. But the nightmare, it wasn't over. Later that evening, her eyes, they started burning like someone was pouring acid straight into them. They swelled shut, they got infected, and for 2 full weeks, she was in absolute agony. And every single night after that, for a couple of weeks, she heard strange noises right outside her bedroom window. Beeping, scratching, and tapping on the glass. Like whatever it was still out there. It was still watching and still waiting. Now, this wasn't a movie and it wasn't a dream. This really happened. And tonight, we're going way deeper into this encounter. And we're going to be telling 2 more confessions that'll make you think twice about going outside alone in the dark. Welcome back, listeners and watchers, to another dark and disturbing episode of Relative Perspective. As always, I'm your host, Steven, and tonight, for our second installment of Cryptid Month, we're stepping into some shadows that still feel a little bit too close for comfort. Tonight, we're talking about the Mothman, that winged nightmare with glowing red eyes that refuses to stay buried in the past. Now, I know we've covered him once before, it's been a while back, but honestly, the more that I dug back into this, the more that I realized that there is definitely some unfinished business here. Stories that I glossed over last time, encounters that hit harder when you hear them fresh, and reports that keep coming in, even now. I don't know if you remember last week, but I did say that we were going to dive into the Goat Man. But the more that I dug into this topic, the Mothman, that's when I realized this was the one. Now, if you would like me to do an episode on the Goat Man, which I will, go ahead and put it down in the comments, and I'll definitely do a deep dive into that as well. Now, if you stick with me to the end, you will definitely understand why I made this decision to do another episode on the Mothman. Because believe me, this one hits hard as hell. We're going to start with some of the darkest sightings that I came across. A daylight stare down that leaves lasting marks. A thing that calls out like it's trying to pull you in. And one recent nightmare that crawls straight out of the water, just like it was waiting for you. Hypnotic eyes, stalking shadows, and that feeling that you're not alone, even after the lights turn on. If you've ever wondered why this creature, it keeps showing up in our world, and what it might mean when it does, go ahead and stick with me, because believe me, this one is going to linger. After all, the truth, it depends on where you're standing, and that, my friends, is relative perspective. It's a calm, sunny morning in late November of 1966. You have Connie Jo Carpenter, just 18, driving home after church along Route 33. This was a quiet road. She had open fields on one side and the deserted Mason County Golf Course on the other side. The sun was up and everything feels peaceful and ordinary. Then her eyes catch something standing right at the roadside that she said definitely didn't belong. She said there was a tall, gray figure at least 7 feet high, broad and muscular looking, with wings folded so tight that it looked like a cloak. But it was those eyes that stopped her cold. She said that they were large, round, and glowing a deep, burning red. And just like that, they locked onto hers through her windshield. And Connie later said, those eyes were very red, and once they locked onto me, I couldn't take my own eyes off of them. It's like his stare, it pulled her in, almost hypnotic. It was freezing her in place while her car, it started drifting towards it in the ditch. Now, luckily, she finally snaps out of that hypnotic phase that she was in. She stomps on the gas, she straightens the wheel, and she hauls butt back home. But she wasn't in the clear because this thing reacted. She said it opened up its wings, and these things are like 10 feet across. And she said it launched straight up into the air with no sound, no flapping, just rising smooth and fast, like gravity wasn't affecting it at all. Then it dives right towards her car, and it swooped right over her roof as she sped off. She said that she could almost feel that shadow pass over her head. Then she hears the rush of air, and her heart was pounding so hard that she could barely breathe. She finally makes it home, she slams the door, and does her best to try to explain whatever happened to her away as just her vivid imagination. But she knew deep down that she witnessed something unnatural. Later that evening was when the pain started. Her eyes, they burned like fire. They were swelling up, they were turning red, and they were watering nonstop. Now, this lasted for over 2 weeks. They were infected, itchy, and almost swollen shut. Almost like she'd stared into something that was too bright or too wrong. She goes to the doctors thinking that they could tell her what was wrong, but they just laughed it off as conjunctivitis. But she knew that it was something much, much more. Because the timing, it lined up perfectly with her locking eyes onto that thing. Now, for weeks after, there's strange sounds that come right outside her bedroom window. She said that there was beeping tones, scratching on the glass, and she still had that eerie feeling that something was watching her. The bad thing is, Connie, she felt like she was marked by it. Almost like the Mothman had singled her out in the middle of the day, and he was not ready to let her go. Now, this one, it really hits different because it happened in broad daylight. There was no hiding in shadows, there was no late night drive. Just an ordinary morning drive turned into a direct and personal nightmare that left real lasting damage. It's that dead hour before dawn when the world, it feels empty. The streets are silent. The houses, they're dark. You only see the occasional porch light flickering. Paula Solimini steps out alone to haul her garbage bin to the curb. This was the same routine that she had done 100 times. The air, it was cold and still, and there was no wind at all. She got to the curb, she left her trash can, and that's when she heard it. Low, wet, guttural rumbles that seemed like they were rolling across the street right at her. She said that this wasn't animal growls, but something deeper, almost vocal, like words trying to form in a throat that wasn't built for them. That's when she turns and looks up, and her blood, it runs cold. Directly across the street, half hidden in shadows, stands a huge, massive figure. She said that this thing was 7 or 8 feet tall. It had dark fur or feathers matted all over its muscular body. Then she said it had these wings that looked like bat wings that were folded, but she said they were twitching slightly. Then she saw those red eyes glowing through the light. They locked onto her like spotlights. Now, as you can imagine, Paula's instincts, they were screaming for her to run. But for a frozen second, she couldn't move at all. She said the noises, they kept coming, rhythmic, insistent, and pulling at her to follow him. She said that it felt deliberate and personal. This thing, it wasn't just watching. It was calling her and urging her to cross the street. The fear, it hits like a wave, overwhelming and primal. The kind that makes your legs weak and your mind go blank. She finally breaks this hypnotic spell. She backs up slowly. She turns and she bolts for her house. She said that she was running so hard and so fast that her feet actually hurt her while they were slamming on that concrete. But she wasn't fast enough because behind her, She swears that she can hear it. Faint wing rustles and heavy footsteps on pavement that stops just short of following her. Then she hears a low rumble that echoes like it's right there at her back. And she doesn't dare look, because every fiber says that if she turns, this thing will be right there, inches away. She finally gets to her house. She bursts inside. She slammed the door. She threw the deadbolt and she chained it. Then reluctantly, she peers through the blinds with shaking hands. To her surprise, the streets, they were empty. There was no figure, no eyes. It was gone like smoke. But the terror, it clings. Her heart, it won't slow. Her skin was crawling, and her mind was replaying those sounds over and over again. Now later, understandably, that she couldn't go to sleep. Every creak in the house, she said it felt like it was trying to get in. Later, when she started digging, she learned that this wasn't an isolated event. 2017 saw dozens of reports just like this in the suburbs of Chicago. The same red eyes, the same winged thing that was standing outside of other people's homes. And not only that, the other encounters claimed that they often felt the same luring pull, that feeling that it wanted you to come closer so it could do something to them. Now, Paula knew what she felt was not imagination. This thing was intelligent, patient, and it had chosen her that morning. She said that she couldn't get over that sense of being singled out. And that's why I chose this story. That's why this one sticks. Because it turns your safe, everyday routine into a trap waiting to spring. It's the kind of late night that feels harmless at first. Barbara and Shayna Clippert are just hanging out in their car in their apartment parking lot just after going to eat some dinner at McDonald's. They were in the car, talking, laughing a little, and just winding down before they stepped inside. Now, of course, the lot that they were parked in was dimly lit, and shadows, they were thick around the edges. And there was a canal running dark and quiet along the backside of this parking lot. No one was around, so they thought. That's when they hear it, an unearthly screech that slices through the air like tearing metal. It wasn't a bird, and it wasn't a fox. They said it wasn't anything that they'd ever heard before. It was guttural, angry, and way too close. Shayna, her head snaps right towards that canal. There, crawling up the embankment on all fours, is something massive. She said it was black as midnight, slick, and dripping from the water. And it was moving slow and deliberate, like a predator that knows it's been seen. This thing looked humanoid, but horribly, horribly wrong. It had long limbs, wings that folded tight against its broad back, and its head was low and predatory. Then this thing rose to full height as it reached the top of the canal. It was towering, muscular, and those red eyes igniting in the dark like burning coals locking straight onto that car. Barbara, being Shayna's mom, her maternal instincts overrides everything. She throws open the door and she steps out to get a better look, and her heart was beating out of her chest the whole time. Shayna, she yelled for her mom to stop, but fear and curiosity, it pulls her out too. They edge closer to this canal, and they're staring down at this thing that now it's staring right back at them. There was no fear in its posture, just intelligence and hunger. It knows that they're there, and it's waiting for them to make the first move. That's when the wings, they explode open. They were huge, leathery, and it was blotting out any light that was there. Then a thunderous flap cracks the night like a gunshot. And the downdraft, it slams them directly into their face, whipping their hair and their clothes. And that's when this creature, it launches upward with terrifying power. It wasn't graceful, but aggressive, like it could have come straight for them if it wanted. Shayna, she screams as loud as she can. Barbara, she grabs her by the arm and yanks her back to the car. They jump in, they haul butt to their apartment, and they sprint as fast as they could to get inside. They slam the door, they lock it, and they chain it, and they collapse against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. They didn't sleep at all that night. It seemed like every creak in that apartment, it sounded like claws on the roof. And every shadow that they saw outside their window, it felt like those red eyes watching them. Now, Barbara and Shayna later told investigators that they felt targeted by this thing, almost like it had emerged from that canal specifically because they were there. It knew their routine, it knew their car, and it knew their home was just steps away. And the worst part, it didn't just disappear in the sky. It left them with that bone deep certainty that this thing could crawl out at any time. That their safe place, it wasn't safe anymore. And that whatever it was, they felt that it wasn't done with them yet. Okay, so where did this thing come from? How does a 7-foot winged nightmare with glowing red eyes suddenly show up in a quiet West Virginia town and refuse to leave our collective imagination? Well, to find all that out, we need to go back to the very beginning. I'm talking about the real beginning, not the myth that grew later. The story, it kicks off in November of 1966 in a little town called Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, this was a small river town with only a few thousand people, surrounded by woods, old munitions bunkers from World War II, and the Ohio River. The first reported sighting hits around November 12th of 1966, when 5 gravediggers in a nearby town spot a tall, man-like figure with wings, and it was flying overhead. They described it as gray, fast, and just wrong, like something that definitely didn't belong in the daylight. Then, 3 days later, on November the 15th, that's when the big one drops. You had 2 young couples. You had Robert and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette. They were driving near the abandoned TNT area when their headlights catch a 7-foot creature, and this thing had massive wings and blazing red eyes. It chases their car at high speed, screeching right before it peeled off. They race to the sheriff's office, and they are terrified. And word spread so fast that the local paper ran a story about this the very next day. From there, it explodes. Over the next 13 months, up until December of 1967, you had more than 100 people in Point Pleasant and surrounding areas that described the same kind of encounters. They saw glowing red eyes staring from the woods, wings rustling outside windows, and that same terrifying screech echoing throughout the dark. Not only that, you had pets disappear, cars got chased, and people, they felt watched and marked. Now, understandably, the town was on edge. You had armed posses that went out and hunted this thing, but it always seemed to slip away. Now, let's talk about a guy by the name of John Keel. This dude is a New York paranormal investigator and writer who shows up in 1966 originally to chase UFO reports for a magazine article. He interviews dozens of witnesses, including local reporter Mary Heyer. Now, Mary, she's actually Connie Joe Carpenter's aunt, one of the stories that we told earlier, and she documented many, many cases. Now, as time goes on, Keel's take on this thing, it gets darker and stranger. He believes the Mothman, it's not just a creature. It's part of a bigger phenomenon. Now, he ties it to UFOs, strange lights in the sky, men in black style visitors, and even phone calls from an entity that he called Indrid Cold. This dude was a smiling, otherworldly figure who claimed to be from another dimension, and he predicted crazy events. Honestly, this dude could have his own episode. I want you to let me know in the comments if you would like me to do a deep dive on old Indrid Cold. Believe me, it is definitely a crazy story. Now, back to Keel. He saw the Mothman as an interdimensional being, almost like a harbinger or a warning from somewhere else. In his 1975 book called The Mothman Prophecies, Keel, he argues that the sightings were connected to the Silver Bridge collapse. That bridge was the main link between Point Pleasant and Ohio. Now, on December 15th of 1967, during rush hour, it suddenly buckled and plunged into the icy Ohio River. You had 46 people that died in that terrible accident. You had whole families, Christmas shoppers, and even wrapped Christmas gifts floating in the wreckage. Now, sightings, they tapered off right around then, and some people claim to have seen a winged figure near that bridge not long before it collapsed. Keel, he suggested that the Mothman was some type of prophecy, almost like a sign of impending doom that nobody heeded. But there is a lot of locals that take this story even deeper. They believe that this whole thing is tied to a 200-year curse placed on the land by none other than Chief Cornstalk himself. Back in 1777, the great Shawnee leader was murdered while being held as a hostage at a place called Fort Randolph. This was right there in Point Pleasant. On his deathbed, the story goes, he cursed the area and its people, swearing that tragedy would keep coming until justice was served. Some folks, they claim that the Mothman is basically that curse taking physical form, almost like a vengeful spirit or omen sent to curse the town, especially when the Silver Bridge fell. Some say that you still hear older residents of Point Pleasant saying that it's Cornstalk's revenge. Now, before 1966, there are no clear Mothman stories in local folklore, though there are some that link it loosely to things like Thunderbird myths or Banshee-like harbingers from other cultures. Now, you got the skeptics that they point to misidentified birds like the sandhill crane. This thing is really tall, it's got red eye patches, and its wingspan is about 7 feet. And you have some that say this could easily be escaped exotic pets or mass hysteria fueled by the first newspaper stories. Yet they can't explain the consistency. You had the same eyes, the same wings, and the same type of pursuits, all across unrelated witnesses that keep this story alive. Today's theories, they seem to split. Some see this thing as a cryptid, like me, and others, they see it as an omen tied to disasters. Some claim that there were actually other Mothman reports that popped up before other tragedies. And then you had some people believe that this was a government experiment gone wrong next to those TNT bunkers. Whatever this thing was, the Mothman, it didn't just appear in 1966. It changed Point Pleasant forever, turning a quiet town into ground zero for one of America's darkest legends. And the big question, it still lingers. Was it warning us, or was it doing something worse? Okay, let's get real for a minute. Not everyone buys into the Mothman as some winged harbinger, or an interdimensional visitor for that matter. There are solid arguments on both sides, and to be fair, I believe they both should be heard. First, let's jump into the skeptics' take, because it starts with what we can actually explain. Skeptics, they point out that in the original 1966 sightings, they line up perfectly with known animals that were in that area. Like we said before, the top suspect was the sandhill crane. They said that they could easily have wandered off course during migration into West Virginia. All you have to do is add dim lighting, panic, and adrenaline, and a big bird on the ground or in low flight looks way more monstrous, especially if it's startled and it takes off really fast. And you have other candidates that include large owls, like the barred or the great horned owl. Now, both of these things, they have huge wingspans, a silent flight, and glowing eyes from reflections. A guy by the name of Joe Nichols and other investigators have argued that the classic Mothman description fits an owl carrying prey, or it's just perched in a weird way. Then you have the psychology angle. They say that it could either be mass hysteria or suggestion. Once the first news story hit in November of 1966, the town, it was buzzing. You had people that started looking for it. You even had armed posses that went out, and fear, it spread like wildfire. They say that witnesses who might have seen a crane or an owl could have filled in the gaps with what they heard or read, like those red eyes, those huge wings, and that fast pursuit. Because expectation, it sometimes seems to shape perception. And another argument that they had was there was no physical evidence that ever turned up. There were no feathers, no tracks that weren't explained, and there were no bodies. Then they talk about the Silver Bridge collapse. They said that it was tragic, but all they thought it was a structural failure due to overloaded traffic and poor maintenance. And they also said that the Harbinger idea came later, and it came from John Keel's novel. And they say that this is classic pattern seeking. Bad things, they happen everywhere. And retrofitting a monster, it almost makes it feel meaningful. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at what the believers say. And this is where it gets hard to dismiss outright. Believers, they argue that the consistency across dozens of unrelated witnesses is way too strong for simple misidentification. People, they all describe the same details over those 13 months. You had 7-foot height, the 10-foot wingspan, glowing red eyes that hypnotize or burn, screeching sounds, and high-speed chases. And no one ever retracted their story, even years later. And many of these people, they were ordinary, trusted folks. And they said that none of these people were attention seekers. And all of them said that these encounters, they felt intelligent. Things that chased cars, stared through windows, or they seemed to target people. John Keel's theory, it takes this even further. He thinks that Mothman is either an ultra-terrestrial or an interdimensional entity, not from outer space, but from another layer of reality, appearing as either a warning or a probe. He said that these things suggest something way bigger at play. Then the believers talk about the Silver Bridge as well. They see it as almost a prophecy. Sightings, they peaked around that time, then it stopped after 46 people died. And this story, it doesn't end in 1967. You have modern sightings, especially in Chicago, from 2011 up into the 2020s, with 50 plus reports of people seeing red-eyed winged figures near homes. And these witnesses, they describe the same luring pull and the same dread. Believers tend to ask, if this thing was just cranes or owls, why the ongoing pattern, the personal terror, and the feeling of being marked? Maybe this thing is a cryptid that we just haven't identified, a surviving relic, or a genuine harbinger showing up when doom is close. What makes it hard for the believers is the lack of hard proof. That's what makes it paranormal. It seems to slip through our nets on purpose. So, which side holds up for you? The skeptics, they have logic and science on their side, and they use simple explanations that fit without invoking the unknown. And the believers, they have the raw human testimony, the patterns that refuse to die, and that nagging what if that keeps this legend alive. You know, after going through these stories again, like the daylight stare that burned Connie's eyes for weeks, that luring call pulling Paula right to the edge of her driveway, and Barbara and Shayna watching something crawl out of that dark canal, almost like it was coming for them specifically. These aren't just old tales or blurry photos. They're real people, they're regular folks just like you and me. All they did was step outside their normal lives just for a few seconds, and they came face to face with something that did not belong. I can just imagine the fear in their voice when they tell this story, the way that their hands might shake even years later. That's real, and that's the kind of stuff that seems to stick with you. Now, for me, I believe that there are definitely things out there that we have not fully explained yet. Creatures, entities, whatever the heck you want to call them. These are all beings that fit what people call the Mothman. It's possible that they could be rare animals that we've missed, or maybe they slipped in from somewhere else. And another possibility, maybe they show up when the world is about to shift in a big way. You know, I don't have all the answers, and honestly, I don't feel like I need to. What I do know is that too many unrelated people in too many places over too many years have seen and felt the exact same thing for this to be nothing. And that is the part that keeps me coming back to all these stories. They remind us that the world is bigger, stranger, and a little more scary than we'd like to admit. But they also remind us that we're not alone in wondering. It seems like we're all standing in different spots, seeing different pieces of the puzzle, and that's okay. And to be honest with you, that's what makes this journey worth it. Okay, guys, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate every single one of you for sticking around through these dark Mothman stories. Now, if you haven't already, go ahead and pound down on the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a weekly upload. And believe me, you definitely don't want to miss next week's installment for Cryptid Month. Now, if you've got your own paranormal encounter, strange experience, or maybe you even have a Mothman experience that you've been hiding, I'd love to hear it. All you have to do is drop me an email at relativeperspective76@gmail.com. Who knows, maybe we could share your story on a future episode. You know, tonight's episode, it kind of got to me a little bit. You had the glowing red eyes, the luring call, and that weird thing crawling out of the water. It all reminds us how thin the line can be between our everyday world and something else entirely. Again, I want to thank you for watching. You've been listening to Relative Perspective, and as always, I'm your host, Stephen. God bless you, we love you, and have a good night. Stop messing with me, Wethy. Leave me alone. God bless you, we love you, good night. They won't leave me alone.
He stops.
Shut up, Wesley.